We have Sean Rose with the big stories, big story making news this week. The governor just had a little chat with us, a little on-air chat. And certainly, Sean, you got a lot to say.
Good evening. Well, I noticed that you looked at my script, so you know what the big story is tonight. Yes, the governor did deliver his verdict on the Public Accounts Committee's request for a commission of inquiry into the cruise fare project. And his finding, or his report, I am sure that there are many people who would view it differently. But he highlighted a number of very important factors coming out from what he has put together in terms of reports coming from the Caribbean Development Bank, and as he says, a private or a sort of a balanced report from an unknown source. He did not disclose that source. But what he's saying is that there is no need to proceed with commission of inquiry into the cruise fare project or any other project for that matter. However, His Excellency Governor John Duncan has highlighted the need for improved transparency in the administration of governance here in the Virgin Islands. He says that the BVI has slipped behind in adopting principles of open government. Let's hear him in this clip.
Both the Auditor General's and the Public Accounts Committee report raise concerns about decision-makers' relationship with commercial entities. Concerns, whether justified or not, and rumour are the inevitable result of a lack of transparency. I have made clear to both the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition that I would strongly encourage the Virgin Islands to adopt all three measures above as soon as possible in order to continue our tradition of being an overseas territory with one of the most effective democratic processes. In conclusion, having considered in detail the Public Account Committee's report, the reports of the Auditor General, the previous correspondence of my predecessor, Governor McCleary, and having taken account of the studies of the Caribbean Development Bank and the independent consultant, I see no useful purpose in commissioning a further inquiry into the Port Development Project, or any of the other infrastructure projects mentioned above. The Public Account Committee's and the Auditor General's report clearly set out some of the problems that have occurred under successive administrations. The Caribbean Development Bank's 13 recommendations and the independent consultant's report identify some of the action required to remedy these problems. I have explained what I, as your Governor, see as the three additional important steps needed to increase accountability and transparency.
Well, Sean, it's quite interesting. If I was sum it up in a biblical phrase, it seems like the governor is saying that we all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And he's accepted repentance, and we're looking forward to atonement. So in other words, I didn't hear the report. I had an opportunity to briefly read a little portion of it, but I got the sense that what he was saying is that we need to put institute measures that is going to assist us with being more transparent. Projects
yes.
are difficult to do.
That's right.
Sometimes it's frustrating with the bureaucracy,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. And in the zeal of the elected representatives to get these things done, these important things done for the country, for the people of the country, they might take some shortcuts. They might not perhaps be as transparent as they should. But he wants to see that. He wants to see that.
There is also, and he has pointed that out as well. There is a need for upgrading the various processes as it relates to the
procurement,
the procurement process in the territory, the procurement for public projects, or the public procurement process for projects. And he's saying that pretty much when compared with other territories and other countries in the Caribbean as well, the BVI is lacking there because some of the existing procedures are really outdated. And that causes members of governments to push for efficacious measures so that they can get these projects implemented quickly in the public's interest. And in doing so, they run the risk of appearing to be cutting shortcuts and avoiding the various procedures set out.
I also thought that he gave the BVI high marks for his democratic process in the way we handle our elections and our transitions from government to government and the stability in the country. I think he gave the BVI high marks as well. I was happy to hear him say that he wasn't going to allow himself to be used as a political football, that's my words, and be used to further the agenda of one political group or the other. So I thought that was a very intelligent
well, the governor has a very unique responsibility, and like some of us, for example, here in media, who cannot and ought not to lean on any one particular side. And so the governor, he has that responsibility. He serves the entire territory, and irrespective of which party is in office in government, he has that responsibility to report to the people and to serve the people and to ensure that he's being fair and balanced in all that he does. And I think pretty much he was able to communicate that. I'm only hoping, though, that the comments, the suggestions that he has raised, in addition to the 13 recommendations identified by the CDB, that the government apparatus can use that to help strengthen the management of public affairs in BVI in years to come.
Well, I'm sure they will, Sean, just by virtue of the fact that he's in charge of the cabinet. He is the chairman of the cabinet or the leader of the cabinet.
Yes.
And certainly he has the power to raise issues, to implement programs that is going to further the cause of transparency, good governance, democracy. So I have no doubt that he will make sure that those his policies and the suggestions and programs that he'd like to have, that they're implemented.
And as he says, he's put that over to the leader of the opposition. So he's expecting the two major parties, the Virgin Islands Party and the National Democratic Party, to embrace these suggestions. But it's quite interesting too that he wants, as he says happens in Anguilla, public the discussions in cabinet to be made public, because for years many people have no idea what takes place behind closed doors as it relates to cabinet meetings. And I would suspect that will cause a culture shift in terms of how cabinet meetings are held as well.
And of course, many of us have been saying for years, what can our government have to discuss on our behalf that we can't know? And I think that seems to be the position that the governor is taking, and certainly I think people of the BVI is going to be happy that he's taking that position, because I mean, you know, what can you be talking about that you can't tell me? You can't say, well, you know, so and so's going on, and you know, these are the challenges that
you may
we're
recall
having.
too, Edrenka, that this government has the National Democratic Party administration. I recall they have begun some work on the Freedom of Information bill, and I would suspect that that process would be, you know, will now take on some wings and come even much more quicker to the House of Assembly and have it passed and so forth. But as the governor says, having the Freedom of Information bill doesn't necessarily give you easy access to information.
Well, I could tell you from experience, because I happen to have been on the Freedom of Information Act committee.
Yes.
Under the commissioner, the Law Reform Commissioner Ray Harris. And there's an important piece of legislation,
yes.
And it's sitting on the shelf. It needs to go to
shake the dust off.
Yeah,
yes.
Pick it up and bring it into to realization, into reality. However, I think the governor is quite right, and you're quite right, that having a Freedom of Information Act doesn't mean that you'll have access to information.
But that requires a culture shift as well.
Well,
there are some public officers who insist that they're not talking to you because you're in the media or you're not in their particular department, etc.
Well, the Act provides for that, so the public officials will have to comply. The civil servants will have to comply. What is the real challenge is the infrastructure that is going to need to be put in place to facilitate the gathering, collection, storing,
yes.
and accessing the information. It'll be quite infrastructure challenge
right.
to have
For
that
example,
information.
a central portal where you can publish the information, so
having
it can be accessed.
having that information readily available
yes.
is costly, And I suspect that that perhaps is one of the reasons why it has not yet come into existence.
There's a
But
positive
certainly-
side too, that it creates employment opportunities because you need people
absolutely.
to facilitate that.
Absolutely, because I know, several times I'm looking for information and I have to, it's like pulling teeth sometimes to get the information you need, because the civil servants don't have a clear directive of what they can give out and what they cannot give out.
Right.
And I think that, that once that is clear, I think that the access will be easier. It's just a matter of
That's right.
how, the technical aspect of it, the physical aspect of storing the information and compiling it and making sure it's available, and then being able to retrieve it in a reasonable time and an effective form.
So improving the archival process is going to be
I think what is the real challenge
Yes.
here. Yeah. I know.
So a number of other things were said, but pretty much no commission of inquiry. So feel free to move on. But as the governor pointed out as well, the PAC request for that inquiry was really based on the Auditor General's report on the initial aspect of the cruise pair project, and had nothing to do with the subsequent work, which were actually approved by the UK and met the requirements set out by the financial protocol. So,
well, I'll tell you, I did not expect a commission inquiry, because I read the.
Why not? There was so many questions hanging around.
No, well, I read both the reports, and in both and I went through them thoroughly, I might add, and both reports were potential conflict of interest.
And the ministers did argue that. They did say that the evidence wasn't very strong.
The possibility of this.
Very circumstantial
Yeah,
evidence.
there was really no evidence, no smoking gun, so to speak,
But
to say that there was any
maybe it's
wrong.
the PSC's fault.
To say there was any wrongdoing.
Because the governor said that the PSC could have called on ministers of government to give evidence, and not necessarily call on people who might have simply had evidence that was based on circumstantial
whoever the fault was, it wasn't in the reports. There was nothing to go on. And I think what really happened is the political side took charge. And so a lot of aspersions.
So you're saying that request was a political football?
A lot of aspersions were being cast. A lot of
but on both sides.
Well, I said a lot of aspersions was being cast. I didn't say on whose side.
Yeah.
A lot of aspersions were being cast.
Yes.
A lot of inaccurate information was being put forward, and things were. I mean, I heard one report in the online news that there is corruption. There was a statement of affirmative statement
Yes.
that the Auditor General found corruption, and that was absolutely untrue. So I think the governor did a thorough job, and the result that he has concluded with, I expected that result. And I think any intelligent person reading those reports would see exactly what happened and what was going on.
But I'm sure there'll be mixed reviews to the governor's
Absolutely, everybody's gonna have their
verdict,
opinion. So
nevertheless.
in next few days, we'll have a field day with the story.